Okay, we are on the middle of page 81. This video will be the example on how to add and subtract fractions, and this video will actually go on to the top of page 82 and do those practice problems as well. This is called adding and subtracting fractions, and up to this point we have only multiplied fractions, which, kind of maybe medium difficulty, maybe even kind of on the easy side. Adding and subtracting fractions can be easy as well, but there's a different set of steps that we use. So pay super close attention to this, perhaps maybe even watch this video a couple times. So let's go check out the examples. Let's read the directions at the top. It says, you have learned that to add or subtract two fractions, you can rewrite the fractions so that they have the same denominator. Typically the term I use is common denominator. You can use the least common multiple of the denominators of the fractions to rewrite the fractions. So remember in Module 2 we did a lot of GCF. Well, that helps us simplify fractions. We also did a lot of LCM. That helps us find common denominators. So let's check this out. I think what I'm going to do is a couple things. I'm going to go ahead and enlarge this a little bit. I'll make a little whiteboard here. And I'm going to show you how this works. Okay. So I'm going to cover that up. The problem right here says add 8/15 plus 1/6. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. And I want to point out to you again that we have switched operations. Up until this point we've been multiplying fractions, now we're adding. And at the beginning of this we read that they have to have the same denominator. They don't have the same denominator, but watch how easy it is to make them have the same denominator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the multiples of 15 and 6, and I'll multiply them by a number to get the LCM. For example, if I multiply 15 by 2, I get 30. So what I'm doing is I'm rewriting this denominator down here. If I multiply 6 by 5, I get 30. That's called a common denominator. 15, a multiple of 15 is 30, a multiple of 6 is 30. Now I have the same denominator. Now all you have to remember is if you do something like if you multiply a denominator by 2, you have to go up and multiply that numerator by 2. So I multiply this whole fraction, numerator and denominator, by 2, and I get 16/30. If I multiply this by 5, I get 5/30. Now I can add those up. I wasn't allowed to add up 15ths to 6, but I can add up 30ths to 30ths. And I add those up, and the cool thing is that you don't actually add the denominator. 30ths plus 30ths equals 30ths. You only add the numerator. You get 16 plus 5 is 21. And that's pretty darn close to the answer. The only problem there is we need to simplify by dividing by the GCF of 21 and 30. The greatest common factor of 21 and 30 is 3. We've been practicing that. We've been simplifying our answers with multiplying fractions. So we simplify our when we add fractions. And 21 divided by 3 is 7. And 30 divided by 3 is 10. So a reminder of the steps. I'll change color here. The steps are, the first step is to find the LCM of 15 and 6. The LCM of 15 and 6 is 30. The second step is that whatever you do to a numerator, you do to its, whatever you do to a denominator, you do it to its numerator. So I get my my numerators. I then just add the numerators, and then I simplify by dividing by the GCF. Divide by the GCF. Okay. You may or may not need to pause this video, rewind it, watch this again. What this video is going to do, though, is go on to page 82 and show you how to put that that plan into action. Oh, I'm sorry, we do have a number 14. I didn't even see this at the bottom. We got a number 14 real quick, then we'll go on to the next page. It says, can you use the LCM of the denominators of the fractions to rewrite the difference? What is the difference? This is a really fancy way of saying, is this the same thing for subtraction? And the answer is, it is. Check this out. All I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply 15 by 2, and I get 30. I'm going to multiply 6 by 5, and I get 30. If you're thinking, Mr. Smith, you just did this. I know, but the problem is different because I'm going to get, I'm going to subtract when I do this. So I multiply my numerators by the same thing I multiplied my denominators by. So I get 16/30 minus 5/30, and I get 11/30. So the conclusion you draw there is that subtraction is exactly the same thing as addition. You find a common denominator and then you subtract the numerators. So the difference is 11/30. I guess there's two questions. It's can you? The answer is yes, you can. And the second question is, what is the difference? The difference doesn't mean like identify different things. Difference is the answer to a subtraction problem. So what goes on your line here is the answer yes, and the difference is 11/30. And if you're thinking, well, how come you didn't simplify 11/30? 11 and 30 don't share a factor. Okay, now this video is going to go on to the top of page. This is the top of page 82. And the deal here is we've got 6 problems, and I'll go through each of them. You may need more instruction, and if that's the case, you need to pay good attention to the instruction. You may need to just practice. That's fine. It doesn't matter to me whether you pause the video and try them and then check your answers, or whether you watch the video for more instruction. And then, like I said before, sometimes you watch the video several times before this makes a lot of sense. I think what I'll do here is maybe I'll put my whiteboard on this half of the page and do 15, 17, and 19. And then I'll move my whiteboard over and do the other 3. Okay. So number 15, I'm going to do all my problems right here. I like to copy the problem down just as it was given to me, 5/14 plus 1/6. And then what I do is I think about my multiples. And a multiplication chart would be so handy here. And really what I do is I look at my 14s. I'm just going to, if I were looking at my 14s on a multiplication chart, it would go 14, 28, 42. And what that means is that if I multiply 14 by 3, I get 42. So I just rewrite my denominator right down here. And the reason I stopped at 42 is because I know my 6's really well. If I multiply 6 by 7, I get 42. Remember, our first step is that we need a common denominator. Then we multiply our numerators by what we multiplied our denominator by. So in this case, I multiply everything by 3, so I get 15. I can bring my addition sign down. And in this case, I'm going to multiply by 7. And then I just carefully add my numerators. 7 plus 15 is 22. The denominator remains 42. And a lot of kids would want to put that as your answer, but I hope you recognize that 22 and 42 are divisible by 2. And I realize I'm running out of space, so watch what I'm going to do. I'm simply going to divide these by 2. I can do that mentally. 22 divided by 2 is 11, so on my line I'm going to put 11. And 42 divided by 2. Dividing by 2 is the same thing as cutting in half. 42 cut in half is 21. The answer is 11/21. Alright, if you don't understand that one, watch it again. Let's check out number 16. I'm sorry, it's number 17. We're going to go do the odds and then the evens. Number 17 reads 5/12 minus, pay attention to that. A lot of kids want to add this one, 3/8. And the numbers on this one end up being pretty easy. Check this out. If you try to figure out your common denominator of 12 and 8, it's not some big number like 96. Just do your 12s. 12 times 1 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. Just like that, just by doing my 12, I got my denominator. Now, if you don't understand that, watch. It's 12 times 2 is 24, and it's 8 times 3 is 24. 12 times 2 is 24, 8 times 3 is 24. So I'm going to multiply 5 by 2 also. If you've never seen this little dot before, that just means times. 5 times 2 is 10. This is a subtraction problem. I need to go up here and do my numerator. If I do 8 times 3, I need to do 3 times 3, I get 9. Look at how easy this is. 10/24 minus 9/24 is 1/24. That doesn't simplify, and that is the correct answer. Let's check out the next one. This one is a lot more complicated than it really looks. 2/3 plus 6 1/5. And what we're going to do is we're going to ignore the 6 right now. The 6 is not going to matter. Because there's nothing, this is like 0 and 2/3 plus 6 2/3. I could do my whole numbers right now. What's 0 plus 6? It's 6. So my answer is going to be 6 and something. Now I just have to worry about my, in fact you could right now, so you don't get messed up on that, you could just ignore your 6. Now I'm just going to do the same steps I've been doing with my denominators. I'm going to multiply this by 3 to get 15. I'm sorry, I said 3, I meant 5. 3 times 5 is 15. I'm going to multiply this by 3 to get 15. The LCM of 3 and 5 is 15. Now I'm going to multiply my numerators by the same thing. I multiply my denominators, and I'm going to get 2 times 5 is 10. And I'm going to get 1 times 3 is 3. And I'm going to go back and check my sign. It's addition, so I'm going to add. I'm going to get 10 plus 3 is 13. And 15 over 15. We don't add our denominators. And that doesn't simplify because 13 and 15 don't share a factor. And I already added up my whole numbers. 6 and 13/15. All right, those three. We got three more. We did those three. We got three more. We're going to do the evens now. And so I'm going to actually erase my annotations and move these over here. I'm now on number 16. I've got 5/12 minus 3/20. And when I have larger numbers like this, I just like to pick one and go through, and this would be a good one. Just go through your 20s. I'm just going to list my multiples of 20. And when I name a number that's also a multiple of 12, that means I'm done. So 3 times 1 would be 20. That's not the common denominator. I think I said that backwards. 20 times 1 is 20. That's not the common denominator. 20 times 2 is 40. That's not the common denominator because 12 does not divide evenly into 40. 20 times 3 is 60. If you look at a multiplication chart, you realize that 60 is a multiple of both 20 and 12. So my denominator will be 60. How did I get from 20 to 60? I multiplied by 3. How do I get from 12 to 60? I multiply by 5. Now I multiply all of these by 3. 3 times 3 is 9/60. This is subtraction. I'm going to multiply 5 by 5 because I multiplied the denominator by 5. So I multiply the numerator by 5. And I get 25. And now I subtract. And I simply do 25 minus 9. 25 minus 9 is 16 over 60. And I'm very excited to get my answer, but before I write 16 over 60 on the line, I ask myself, do 16 and 60 share a factor? They do. They share a couple factors. You could divide by 2. Some kids would divide by 2. And you'd get 8/30. And then you would need to ask yourself, do they still share a factor? They do. They share a factor of 2. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. And 30 divided by 2 is 15. And that is the answer because 4 and 15 don't share a factor. You could have, to save yourself time back here, instead of dividing those by 2, you could have divided by 4 because 16 and 60 share a factor of 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4, and 60 divided by 4 is 15. The answer is 4/15. All right, number 18. We've already seen a mixed number 1, so we're not going to get too nervous about this. 1 and 3/10. We're not even going to worry about the 1. We'll do that at the end. We're going to add that to 1/4. So I'm going to ignore this 1 right here. I don't need to. I erased it last time. I don't need to do that. First step is to ask myself, what is a good common denominator for tenths and fourths? And if I just count by 10, 10, 20, bing, 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 I got it right off the bat. It's going to be 20. 20 works because I can get there by going 10 times 2, and I can get from 4 to 20 by multiplying by 5. Then I multiply my numerator by 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Multiply this numerator by 5. 1 times 5 is 5. This is addition. 6 plus 5 is 11. My denominator remains 20. My whole number is 1. 1 and 11/20. That's probably the easiest problem out of these 6. And it looked complicated because of the whole number, but the whole number is not a problem. All right, last one. 3 and 1/6 minus 1/7. All right, so again, we can ignore the 3 and we can just focus on our common denominator. If you count by your 6s, 6, 12, 18. If you count by your 7s, 7, 14, 21. They don't actually have a common denominator until you get all the way up to 42. We learned this in Module 2. When two numbers don't share a factor, their LCM is actually just those two numbers multiplied together. So how did I get from 6 to 42? I multiplied by 7. How did I get from 7 to 42? I multiplied by 6. So I multiply this by 7. I multiply this by 6. We always multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number. So 1 times 6 is 6. Pay attention to the fact that this was subtraction. You see that subtraction sign? And so you do 7 minus 6 is 1, 42nd. And then you have 3, and there's nothing to subtract from 3. It's 3 minus 0. What's 3 minus 0? It's just 3. So the answer is 3 and 1/42. All right, good job. You may need to watch that twice. It's kind of a tough concept, but good job. You're done with this this video. You're not done with this page, but you're done with this video. Good job.